The financing of the Crusades. Have you ever wondered who footed the bill for the Crusades? After all, transporting thousands of knights across continents, feeding hungry armies, and erecting fortresses in distant territories is hardly inexpensive. But if the goal was to liberate the Holy Land, why so much financial maneuvering between kings, bankers, and even monks? What interests lay behind this sacred mobilization? Furthermore, could it be that behind the gleaming armor, the Christian banners, and the devout prayers lay a network of financing so sophisticated that it anticipated modern banking practices? What few people realize is that the Crusades were not merely religious wars. They were also colossal economic enterprises, replete with contracts, debts, interest rates, speculations, and financial agreements that would forever alter the relationship between faith and money. Envision indebted knights mortgaging their castles to finance their crusades, or European monarchs heavily taxing their subjects and selling nobiliary titles to fill their coffers before embarking on expeditions to the Middle East. And what's even more intriguing, many of these endeavors were facilitated by religious orders like the Templars, who, in addition to being devout warriors, functioned as international bankers and brokers, boasting a network of agencies stretching from England to Palestine. Yes, the Crusades ushered in a new chapter in the history of money. These armed conflicts paved the way for the foundation of the first international Christian financial banking system, a potent blend of religion, ambition, and power, fueled by silver coins, clandestine promises, and hidden coffers. But where was all this money coming from? Who truly profited from these campaigns? And what was the role of the early Templar banks in this machinery of war and spirituality? In this episode of The Enriching World, you will discover how the financing of the Crusades reveals much more than a religious chapter in history. It demonstrates the birth of a financial logic that still today influences wars, alliances, and major corporations. Brace yourself for a descent into a world of gold, blood, and faith. For even divine will has not escaped the dominion of money. In the year 1095, Pope Urban II issued a call that would reverberate for centuries. Christians of the West should unite to liberate Jerusalem from Muslim control. The clergy promised eternal redemption, the nobility saw an opportunity for glory, and the common people an escape from famine and servitude. But no heavenly aspiration is achieved without a hefty earthly cost: money. The Crusades were not merely religious wars. From the outset, they were colossal logistical undertakings. A single knight required a fortune to participate: armor, horses, supplies, weapons, and provisions for months, sometimes years of campaigning. It is estimated that a French knight, for instance, would spend the equivalent of 4 or 5 times his annual income to finance his journey to the Holy Land. For many of them, this meant mortgaging land, selling titles, or incurring debts with nobles, kings, or even religious orders. The first to profit from this religious fervor were the monarchs themselves. Kings and princes saw in the Crusades a means of raising funds. Extraordinary taxes were levied, such as the Saladine Tithe, a tax imposed on subjects to finance the Third Crusade. Churches were compelled to contribute, and even peasants paid their share, even those who never left their villages. But it wasn't just the kings who profited from the sacred cause. The seeds of a new financial elite were sown: the military religious orders, particularly the Knights Templar. Founded at the turn of the 12th century, they soon realized that protecting pilgrims was merely one aspect of their mission. With holdings in dozens of countries, they began accepting deposits, safeguarding valuables, and issuing letters of credit. A crusader could deposit his coins in Paris and withdraw the equivalent in Jerusalem, indeed, a kind of medieval international bank. While the populace beheld the cross-emblazoned banner fluttering in the wind, others perceived contracts being sealed, promissory notes being signed, and profits being tallied. Faith mingled with finance, and every triumph or setback on the sands of Palestine echoed in the trading halls of Europe. Another crucial player was Italian cities such as Venice, Genoa, and Pisa. They profited handsomely from the transportation of Crusader armies, leasing ships, supplying weaponry, and levying fees. In return, they were granted commercial privileges in eastern ports. Thus, the Crusades also served as a catalyst for the emergence of mercantile empires. What had begun as a holy war was taking on the appearance of a grand enterprise. And with each campaign organized, the financial web behind it became more intricate. The stage was set, and the God-fearing financiers were ready for their close-up. As the Crusades progressed, the financial web underpinning the military campaigns evolved into a sophisticated machinery that influenced the fates of kings and popes. And who wielded control over these intricate gears? Not kings, but monks, or rather, warrior monks, the Knights Templar. While thousands of soldiers sweated and bled in the desert, the Knights Templar constructed a network of fortresses, granaries, and coffers. Their houses, scattered across Europe and the Middle East, functioned as branches of a global bank, guarding valuables, extending loans, and transferring funds securely in a world without reliable paper money. A nobleman wishing to fight in the Holy Land could leave his fortune in London and withdraw the equivalent value in Jerusalem, all through coded messages and unique seals. This transformed the Templars into the most powerful financial institution of the Middle Ages. European monarchs began to seek loans from them, including Philip IV of France, who would later turn against the order, partly due to these debts. The order's economic influence grew so significantly that some historians compare its structure to what would today be considered a central bank allied with a private military force. But the Templars did not operate in isolation. Italian cities like Venice and Genoa became indispensable allies. Controlling maritime transport, they demanded payment in gold and commercial privileges in conquered territories. Often, before a crusade set sail, negotiations between knights and merchants could stretch for months. Armies required provisions, weapons, clothing, horses, maps, and translators, all of which these cities supplied through elaborate contracts. As time wore on, the mystical ideals of the early Crusades gave way to far more pragmatic objectives. The Fourth Crusade, for instance, never even reached Jerusalem. Instead, the Crusaders sacked the Christian city of Constantinople in 1204, driven by debts to the Venetians and the allure of easy profits. This event was a shocking turn of events. Soldiers sent to fight for God ended up plundering Orthodox churches to settle overdue bills. The cross seemed to bend to the sway of capital. The impact reverberated far beyond that. The Crusades paved the way for the burgeoning growth of mercantile capitalism. In their quest to control trade routes with the East, Europeans began to prioritize material gain over religious devotion. Spices, silk, precious metals, these commodities eclipsed the significance of sacred relics. The spoils of war financed the construction of cities, cathedrals, universities, and, inevitably, more wars. What began as a cry for religious liberation morphed into a machine fueled by money. And those who learned to control the flow of gold learned to control the fate of Europe. In the popular imagination, the Crusades are often portrayed as a saga of faith, heroism, and spirituality. However, behind the cross raised beneath the skies of the Orient lay a far more mundane mechanism, one forged from contracts, coins, debts, and clandestine agreements. The crusade for the Holy Land was also a crusade for economic power. It's disquieting to contemplate that while thousands of soldiers marched under the banner of Christ, others were quietly amassing fortunes in their marble offices, counting coin, chartering fleets, and issuing promissory notes. The ideal of absolute faith gradually yielded to the stark calculus of numbers. In the end, victory truly belonged not only to the generals, but to the financiers. The Knights Templar, once perceived solely as holy warriors, evolved into veritable financiers of crown and sword. Their innovations, including early international credit systems, mobile checking accounts, and deposit security, sowed the seeds that would later blossom into the modern banking system. It is no coincidence that the Templars' downfall was shrouded in accusations of financial impropriety, insurmountable debts, and state conspiracies. They knew too much. They controlled too much, and they owed too much. The Crusades also solidified a commercial elite that transformed port cities like Venice and Genoa into centers of power rivaling entire kingdoms. Trade with the East brought immense wealth, but it also fostered a novel mentality, the pursuit of profit, influence, and expansion. A mentality that centuries later would guide the age of discovery, colonial empires, and the global capitalist system itself. Today, when we look at contemporary conflicts, do we truly find ourselves so far removed from that logic? We still see wars waged under banners of faith, freedom, or justice, but often with veiled motivations, tied to oil, commerce, natural resources, or the control of strategic routes. The cross has changed shape, but gold remains the invisible fuel powering many battles. The history of Crusader financing compels us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Even the most spiritually charged moments in human history were often fueled by shrewdly calculated financial interests. Faith may move mountains, yes, but money determines who excavates them, who profits from the stones, and who chronicles the tale. Now that you know this, what will be the next time you see a holy war with the same perspective? If this story has made you reconsider the relationship between religion, power, and money, leave your comment below. Take this opportunity to like, subscribe to the Mundo Enriquecedor channel, and share this video with those who also love to understand how money has shaped and continues to shape the course of history. Because, in the end, knowing the past is the key to deciphering the present.